All right. Hi, Amber. Thanks for jumping on. Okay. So like I said, feel free to at any point unmute yourselves if you need to or want to, if there's something you want to add, something you want to say. There is the chat option. So that's all right, Amy. I'm glad that you're on. So you can see Amy just popped up in the chat. You guys can pop in there and type things out if you want to, if you'd rather type them there rather than say them, and unmute yourselves. So there is that option. Okay. So thank you so much, guys, for being on. I'm excited about this book club. This is something that I've wanted to do for quite some time. I've read this book. This will now be my third time going through it, and I just really believe that it's one of those books that, you know, everybody and anybody can really benefit from. So let me do this. Let me do speaker view. Good. Okay. All right. So let's start off with, if everybody has their discussion guides, I'm gonna kind of follow the discussion guide, and then also build off of it a little bit. So I won't just stick to just that. Kind of have some topics of discussion aside from it. But to start off, you know, Rachel basically describes the book to be a bunch of hurtful lies and one important truth. And the first question is, what is that one truth? And why does she believe that it's so important to identify and to destroy the lies that we've told ourselves? Do you agree? Why or why not? The one truth is you and only you are ultimately responsible for who you become and how happy you are. She talks about how your life is really up to you. And she talks about how it's impossible to go somewhere new, to become something new without first acknowledging where you are. I myself, you know, do I agree with this? Yes, I feel like we are in the driver's seat. We are in control of our mindset, and everything that we are dealt, everything that we go through, I believe it's in our control, and it's all about mindset. And we'll talk about it. I think it's closer to chapter 6, but where she talks about, you know, having that perception and changing your perception to things aren't happening to you, but they're happening for you. I'm a big believer in that. I think that it's really hard when you're in the moment, or when you're going through a tough time or you're struggling to shift that mindset. And I think that that's where the real challenge becomes, is how are you going to respond or react in those times of struggle. But I think that if you can remind yourself during those times that things don't necessarily happen to you, they're always happening for you, it can really help you to get through those tough times. Then the second question is, why is identifying the lies in our lives sometimes so difficult? Have you had the experience of realizing something you believed about yourself or your life wasn't entirely true? Identifying the lies is so difficult because we rarely hear the lies that we've created about ourselves, because they've been playing so loudly in our ears for so long that it becomes like white noise. So basically we get caught up on these things that we tell ourselves, and we tell them, you know, we hear it in our subconscious thoughts just over and over and over again. We tell them to ourselves all day long, every single day. And eventually it just becomes like white noise. You know, it's like the boy that cried wolf. Like, you just hear it so constantly that you can't believe anything else that you're saying to yourself. So, and then I wrote down, right now, never going to amount to anything and be enough. That's kind of like where she says, have you had the experiencing of realizing something you believed about yourself or your life wasn't entirely true? For me right now, I think the thing that I still struggle with the most is that feeling of like never going to be enough. I had an experience this past weekend where I set a huge goal for the month of August, and I missed it by like the smallest of hair. I tied actually for last place. And because I tied for last place, it came to a tiebreaker, and that tiebreaker I ended up losing. And there's always just that feeling of like what I did wasn't enough. And so for me, that's what I'm struggling with like right now, is that feeling of, will I ever be enough? Or what I do, will what I do ever be enough? And then 3 is, what are your expectations for the book at this point? I think that's going to be different for everybody. You know, having read it for the 3rd time, my expectations are really just to kind of dig a little bit deeper into the meaning behind everything. And, you know, hi, Beck. And really, what are my expectations of the book at this point? I already know what to expect from the book. And I already know what I'm going to gain from it. It's more just like, I really hope that everybody else is gaining what I've gained from it. So chapter 1, something else will make me happy is the lie. You know, the discussion guide has you write down a keeper, which is basically like maybe a quote or something that just really, really stuck with you or really resonated with you. And I had a couple for this chapter. My biggest thing for this chapter was where she said, we're all falling short. You know, I feel like it's really easy, especially in the world that we live in, to like look at people on social media, to look at Instagram and to look at Facebook and to see people on these platforms and to see their highlight reel, because 9 times out of 10, people aren't posting their vulnerable moments. They're not posting their weaknesses. They're not posting the time that their kids are fighting like cats and dogs. They're sharing the times where everything is beautiful and sunshine and rainbows. And so prior to social media, I think it was really easy for people to stay in their own lane and to focus on themselves and to not feel so pigeonholed in their struggles. Whereas now I feel like we're on social media and we're like, well, so-and-so did this today with their kids, and you know, their kids get along so well, and her husband did this for her, and my husband doesn't do that for me. And it's really, really easy to get caught up in this feeling of like you're the only person struggling, or you're the only person falling short in life. And that's just not the case. It's just more oftentimes than not, people are only going to share that highlight reel. So, you know, that feeling of like we're all falling short. And then I also write down, if you're unhappy, that's on you. I think that that's something that we just had when we went to Summit. We had this big presentation by a man named Sean Akers, and I'm going to post the video if I can find it and post it in our group. And he's basically somebody who does research on happiness. Like that's his job. And then he presents on the topic of happiness. And the entire presentation was essentially about how people often think that success leads to happiness, and that's just not the truth. Happiness leads to success. And if we are unhappy, that's on us. And I think it can be hard sometimes when you're struggling or when you're not in a great place. And, you know, somebody says to you, like, you just need to be happy. And you're like, well, how do I do that? How do I make that happen? It's not easy. And I just want to share a little bit. I'm going to share my screen in a second and share a little bit more on Sean's presentation and some key takeaway points that he talked about. But another keeper for me was, life is not supposed to overwhelm you at all times. Life isn't meant to be merely survived. It's meant to be lived. I think that is so important, because we all get into, especially as those of us that are moms, we get into this like survival mode where we're just trying to survive every single day. And life's not designed that way. Like we only get this opportunity once. You only live once. You have one life to live, and you have to remind yourself every day, like, even through the challenges, even when it's hard, even when your kids are young and it's chaotic, or when you're working, 60 hours a week or whatever it is that is your chaos and your struggle, that you're not supposed to just survive through this life. You have to live your life. So the first topic to consider or discuss was, describe a season in your life when you felt overwhelmed or ready to give up. For me, this season was when I was postpartum with my daughter. She had a difficult time breastfeeding. She wasn't able to latch. And for the first 12 days, I thought that she was nursing perfectly fine. My son had breastfed for 15 months, never had a problem. And I was nursing my daughter 12 days and things were, I had all sorts of signs that it wasn't going great. And I would call the pediatrician and they would say, oh, every child's different. It's not a problem. Until day 12, when she really wasn't herself, and I brought her in and they said, she's lost almost 2 pounds. She needs to go to the hospital. And that was a season in my life where I just felt so overwhelmed, and I felt like I just wanted to throw in the towel. I was a new mom. Here I am. I felt like a complete failure, and I felt like everything was my fault. Like, how did I not know that my daughter was not, getting food for 12 days. So what happened and what was the outcome? Obviously my daughter is 2.5 now, and everything ended up okay, but it was a really rough 15 months, probably the hardest 15 months of my life. And what I learned from it is that you know, things can happen and you really have to, like, I had to get away from this space of just blaming myself. I'm really hard on myself. I blame myself for everything. And I spent 15 months doing that. And what I learned is that that really doesn't get you anywhere. You know, we'll talk about in a little bit, one of the chapters where Rachel talks about having a physical response to emotional problems. And that happened for me. And I'll talk about my story a little bit more then, but, you know, that was definitely a time in my life when I felt like I was ready to give up, because it was a difficult time. Number 2 says, Rachel writes, if you're unhappy, that's on you. How do you respond to that statement? Do you agree, disagree? Does it make you a little mad or frustrated? I'll be honest, when Sean Akers first presented at our summit back in June, and he was like, you know, you just have to be happy. Like, success doesn't lead to happiness. Happiness leads to success. I was annoyed by it, because I was like, but if you're not happy, how do you just become happy? You know, like if you're struggling and you're depressed, like, how you can't, it's not like you snap your fingers and suddenly you're happy and your whole life becomes successful. So, you know, I felt like automatically, because I wasn't happy in that moment, that I would never succeed. And he talks a lot about how you can make small changes, and different research that they've done that showed how you can be happy, how you can help yourself get to a happier place. So I want to share my screen real quick with you guys, and I'm going to pull this up. This is a presentation that I did at one point. Can you guys see that okay? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Okay, perfect. All right. So this was a separate topic that he talked about, which was really cool because it related a lot to what I do as a health and fitness coach. But he talked about our perception and how we perceive things. And it was all about how if you're looking at a hill by yourself, judging how steep that hill is, or you're looking at a hill with a friend within 3 feet of you, that you'll perceive that hill to be 10 to 20% steeper if you're standing at that bottom of that hill by yourself than if you're standing next to a friend. So I thought that was a really cool point that he made. It has nothing to do with the happiness piece though. So, okay, so he talked a lot about how we cannot pursue happiness like an individual sport, because the greatest predictor of happiness is other people. Social connection is as predictive of how long you'll end up living as obesity, high blood pressure, or smoking. This is all, again, this is what he does. He researches happiness. So this is what research has shown. And when our brain is positive, every single aspect of our business and many of our health outcomes rise. And the biggest point is, again, that point of happiness leads to success. Success doesn't lead to happiness. He talks a lot about how we often change, like when people have this mindset that success leads to happiness. You know, when I graduate from college, I'm going to be happy. And then, you know, we get there and we graduate, and then we're like, okay, let's change the goalpost to when I get my first job, I'm going to be happy. And then you get your job and you're like, okay, now I graduated college, I have my job. When I get married, I'm going to be happy. And then you get married and you're like, when I have this, I'm going to be happy. And you just continue changing the goalpost. And so you never actually achieve happiness, which after a period of time really makes you feel unhappy, because you're never really celebrating your successes. You've already moved on to a new goal. And so having that mindset that success is going to lead to happiness, it's just never going to happen. Happiness will lead to success. So one of the things that he talked about in terms of, like, you know, how do we choose happiness when life isn't going well before we have the success? Because it's really easy, right? When you're making millions of dollars and you have everything you've ever wanted to be happy. But how do you have that happiness beforehand? And he talked about a research study that they did where every morning they had people start off their day by sending a positive text or an email praising or thanking somebody for something that they had done in their life. Like 2-3 minutes it would take people. And what they did is they researched that if somebody did that for 21 days, because research shows it takes 21 days to make a habit, that the happiness levels of the people who were doing this had skyrocketed versus the people who were not. So it's just reminding yourself that sometimes you'll feel good making others feel good. And again, you know, like back here where we're saying social connection, you know, and happiness isn't an individual sport. It's has so much to do with how you connect with other people. So let me stop the share and go back here. Okay. So, you know, I wrote down that I wanted to share the Sean Ager talk, Happiness Leads to Success. Success does not lead to happiness. And talked about, you know, how we keep changing the goalposts. And one of the things that I love the most that Rachel said in this chapter was, moving doesn't change who you are. It only changes the view outside your window. Now, that being said, you know, there are definitely circumstances or times in your life where getting yourself out of a certain situation may actually change your view, may make you happier, and may, you know, make a big difference in your life. But for the most part, moving isn't going to solve the problem. Like running away from it isn't going to solve the problem, right? And then the third question, which I don't really think is too important, but, you know, how does she distinguish between unhappiness, sadness, and depression? Depression, she talks about being, you know, it's very much a genetic makeup. It's like a chemical imbalance. It's something we can't control. Sadness is often like grief, things brought on by circumstances out of our control, like the loss of a loved one. But being unhappy is when you're not content. You're not settled. You're frustrated. You're angry. All of which are emotions that make us want to hide from our lives instead of embracing them. So that's the key difference there. For my takeaways, I put stop comparing yourself, surround yourself with positivity, find out what makes you happy, and do those things every single day. And bottom line is, you have to choose to be happy. Happiness is a choice, and if you make that choice, then you will have the happiness. Hello. Would you like to say hi? Say hi, everybody. Hi. Say you have to choose to be happy. Okay, chapter 2. This is one of my little ones. This is my little one, huh? Okay, so chapter 2, moving on. Chapter 2, the lie is I'll start tomorrow. And I've got to tell you guys, this is probably the one that I have the most notes on. Like, you can see my paper. It's just like filled with stuff. This chapter is a big one for me as a health and fitness coach, because I work with people all day long, every day. I'm also a group fitness instructor. And I talk to people all day long that talk about starting tomorrow. And I shared in the group when I posted about this chapter, there was somebody that had reached out to me right around actually the time that I was sharing this chapter. I think it was around day 2 or 3. And she was talking about how January 1st, you know, she had told herself, like, I'm going to start, like, this is my New Year's resolution. And here we are in September. And she was like, 9 months. Do you understand? Like, 9 months of me telling myself, I will start tomorrow. And one of the things that I said was, you know, when you start your day every single day and you don't do what you told yourself you're going to do, you're setting yourself up to automatically feel like you have failed. And when you do that over the course of 9 months, you know, we'll talk about this a little bit further in, but you're basically, you're dropping the commitment to yourself. You're letting yourself down every single day. And when you do that over and over and over again, your subconscious mind just stops trusting the things that you're saying to yourself, which is a big problem. So my keeper for this chapter was, when you really want something, you'll find a way. And when you don't, you'll find an excuse. This is probably what I tell people all day long, every single day. I hear every excuse under the sun. I hear every excuse you could possibly imagine. You know, I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I'm too tired. I mean, everything you can imagine. And what it comes down to is, if you really, really, truly want the change for yourself, you'll make it happen. If you don't, you'll find an excuse. And I always tell people, whatever it is that you're telling yourself is your excuse, turn that excuse into your why. So rather than saying, like, I can't do this because I can't do it, tell yourself, you know, I'm going to do this because I have 2 kids. You know, if it's, you know, I don't have the time, well, I'm going to do this because I want to have more time. So Number 1 says, what are some of the reasons women tend to make big plans but never get around to doing what they want to do? Do you recognize this as an issue in your life? She talks about it could be something that you were brought up watching. Like, we are very much the product of who we surround ourselves with. And if you grow up and your parents never make themselves a priority or their health a priority, and you're watching that, then that almost, it's a learned behavior. It's just like all of the other learned behaviors that we learn from our parents or from people in our surroundings. So that could be it. It could be magazines and TV shows. You know, she talks about how there's such a huge emphasis in magazines and TV shows on how to get back on the wagon. But there's really not a whole lot about how to get on the wagon in the first place. And then life happens, plans happen, or life happens, we make plans and those plans fall through because life happens. So those are just some of the reasons. The other thing too, why sometimes people make big plans but never get around to doing it, is fear of failure. Let's be honest, like, we as human beings, we don't like to fail. And when there's that fear of, I do this, I could possibly fail, that's what I see personally more oftentimes than not, is that fear of failure, and people letting that fear hinder them from doing anything. Number 2 says, according to the author, what does a history of breaking promises to yourself do to your subconscious, and what is the typical result? So your subconscious will know over time, like I said earlier, that you cannot be trusted if you keep breaking so many plans and giving up on so many goals. And I think what I love the most about this chapter was her equating it to, like, your friends. And I know for me, like, one of my best friends, she is like reliable to a fault. I can rely on her for anything and everything. If she tells me that we're going to get together, I know she's going to be here no matter what happens. Like, her whole world could erupt and she will still stick true to those plans. And then I also have a friend who will make plans, we schedule things, and it's like, I never really set it in stone on my calendar, because that day likely will come and something may come up. She may have other plans going on. She may be overwhelmed and just want to stay home that day. So I like to kind of think of those 2 examples of the different spectrum of friends, and think of yourself, like, every time you tell yourself, you make plans or you make goals and you don't keep them, you are that friend that is letting you down. You are that friend that is breaking promises and breaking plans. And how do you feel when you have people in your life that are always doing that to you? You don't trust them, right? Like, you don't trust them the way that you trust the friend that you know is going to show up here and be here no matter what. You have to be for yourself the friend that you know is going to show up no matter what. And if over time you've broken that trust with yourself, you're going to have to work really hard to gain back that trust. It's not to say that you can't do it, because you 1000% can. It's just going to take a little bit more time and a little bit more effort for that subconscious mindset to change. And then how does your subconscious know the difference between what you want and what you pretend to want? It looks at a history of how you've tackled similar things in the past. So if every single time you start a diet, by day 3 or 4, you drop off that diet and you give up on that diet, subconsciously, when you tell yourself, I'm going to do this new diet, your subconscious is basically saying, that's not going to happen, because we've done this diet and we've quit. We've done this diet and we quit. We've done that diet and we quit, right? So you have to start thinking of yourself as I want to be able to rely on myself. I'm going to be that friend that I trust is going to do what he or she says. Okay, so according to Rachel, what are some likely results of choosing never to break a promise to yourself? So your subconscious will essentially formulate the likelihood of that happening based on past experiences. You'll force yourself to slow down. And I think that this is really important, and really think things through before you make a commitment. So, think of it like if you were going to make an appointment with a doctor that is a specialist that, if you make this appointment with this doctor and you cancel it, there's going to be a fee associated with it. You're far less likely to just make any appointment on any day at any time for that appointment than you are if it's a doctor where you could not even show up for the appointment and you're not going to get dinged. They're not even going to call you and find out where you are. It'll be like it never even happened. So you have to have that accountability piece. You have to be, when you're making plans with yourself, like you're that doctor's office, that there will be consequences if you don't show up that day. So really think to yourselves, like slow down and say, this is what I want to commit to. Where I'm at in my life, this season of life, is it likely that I can commit to that? And if the answer is like, I don't really know, then you've got to reconsider and rethink. Because again, whatever it is that you're committing to, every time you break a promise to yourself or you don't follow through, your subconscious is keeping track of that. So that says to you, like, I need to slow down and not to commit to things unless I know I'm 110% going to be able to make that happen. And you know, stop talking about goals, plan for how you can meet them. Like really sit down and think it out. Like if this is my goal, is that realistic? Can I make that happen? When I talk to people all the time, you know, I have people that will say, I'll say, you know, what are your goals? And they'll say, I really want to lose like 50 pounds and I want to be a size 4. I'm like, okay, well, 50 pounds is a big goal. Set short-term goals. It's okay to still have that long-term goal because that's the big picture. That's ultimately where you want to get. But you've got to have short-term, very, very achievable goals along the way or you will never get to that long-term goal. So set a goal of, I want to lose 5 pounds by the end of 6 weeks, because the chances are you're likely going to make that happen. Don't set yourself up to fail, guys, because if you set this crazy unrealistic goal, you're not going to probably hit it. And that's just going to change the way that you're looking at everything to be, I failed. And the second you feel like you've failed, what are you going to want to do? You're going to want to throw in the towel and completely give up on it. So set those small, realistic, achievable goals. And for my takeaways, don't break promises to yourself. That's bottom line, point blank. Just don't do it. If you make a promise to yourself, it's a promise that you've thought out through and through. You know it's very realistically achievable, and you make sure it happened. Don't let yourself down. Don't disappoint yourself. Make it happen. This is a big one too. Our society, and this is what Rachel quotes, our society makes plenty of room for complacency and laziness. We're rarely surrounded by accountability. Who do you surround yourself with, guys? Because that has a huge impact on where you're going in this life. Research has shown, this is something that we talked about also at Summit, that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most of your time with. So if you look around and the 5 people that you spend the most time with are not motivated, don't stay committed to their goals, whatever it might be that like where you want to go with your life. For example, I was talking to somebody the other day and she's like, you know, I have these goals with my business, with my health and fitness business, and I have these goals for my own health and fitness. But I feel like my 5 people I'm surrounding myself with are at a very different place in their life. And that sidetracks me from where I want to go because they want to go out drinking every single weekend. Well, that's not really healthy, right? And that's not really good for me. They don't really need to work out because they're naturally thin or whatever it might be. When you surround yourself with those kind of people, you're not going to set higher goals for yourself. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you are not surrounded, but if you don't like the average of those 5 people, you need to change who you're spending the most time with and find people. That's why I love this group so much and why I'm so passionate about what I do and why I love people coming into this accountability group, because that is upping your average. You're now surrounding yourself with positivity, women supporting women, women building other women up, women who have serious goals and are on the path to crush those goals. You automatically up your average. And she's absolutely right. If you look around you, whether it be at work, in a college room, if you're in college, wherever you might be, if you look around you, there are so many more people that are complacent and lazy than that are going to hold you accountable. It's just that simple. So surround yourself with people that are increasing and upping your average. And bottom line, when you really want something, you'll find a way. When you don't, you'll find an excuse. Okay. Our words have power, but our actions shape our lives. So that's another big one. Don't just talk about a goal, plan it out, and how can you meet it? All right, chapter 3, I'm trying to talk really fast, I'm sorry. The lie, I'm not good enough. A keeper for me was a physical response to an emotional problem. And again, I'll talk about that in a second. But I loved where she said, I wasn't doing the most fundamental thing a woman needs to do before she can take care of anybody else. I wasn't taking care of myself. My biggest takeaway from this chapter, and one of the things I tell people all day long, every day, is you cannot pour from an empty cup. There is a reason why when you're on an airplane, the Southwest attendant or whatever airline you fly, there's a reason why they go up to every single mother and they say, in the event of an emergency, your oxygen mask and theirs will come down, put your oxygen mask on first, and then put the mask on your child. The reason being, if you don't take care of yourself first and get oxygen on you, how in the hell are you supposed to take care of your children and keep them safe, right? So make sure that you are taking care of yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If your gas tank is on E, you have nothing left to give anybody else. She talks about workaholism a lot. I think there's a lot of workaholics in this group. I don't feel compelled to work excessively. I do love what I do, but I wouldn't call myself a workaholic. I have very good life-work balance. But I did relate very much to where she said the need to prove my worth coupled with the fact that I'm good at my career made me one heck of a workaholic. And I also really related where she said the belief that in order to be loved, I felt I needed to produce something. That is me in a nutshell. If I miss a goal, like this past weekend, like I told you, I missed the goal by a hair, and it was so important to me. And the second I missed that goal, my worth went out the window. It was like suddenly I didn't have a single piece of value to my husband, to my children, to my parents, to anybody. I very much was raised where, you know, what I did was how I felt loved. If I had a really good soccer game and I scored 3 goals and, you know, my parents told me how proud they were, like I felt amazing. If I got all A's on my report card. So I spent my whole life trying to achieve these crazy goals, like killing myself in school, killing myself in college, killing myself on the soccer field, training every single day to try to please people because I felt like if I produced, that gave me worth. And so that's something I struggle with a lot to this day because I'm a mom. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I used to be a pharmacist. I was making 6 figures. I still have my degree and everything. My license is active, but I don't currently work aside from this health and fitness gig, and then I take care of my kids. And those of you that are moms know it is hard to feel like you're producing a whole lot when you are a mom. You feel like you bounce from one wall to the next, to the next, to the next, and you never really accomplish anything. And so you question your worth a lot as a stay-at-home mom. You question your worth a lot as a mom, period. But where the physical response to an emotional problem happened for me was, again, back to when my daughter was struggling to breastfeed. And that 12-day period when I went in and I found out she wasn't nursing effectively. I completely fell apart because this all comes down to right here, this sentence. I believed that in order to be loved, I had to produce something. I thought that I was not producing nutrition and feeding my daughter. And I have a lot of other stuff that I'm not going to get into today, but relationship-wise with mother-daughter. And I was very anxious when I found out I was having a little girl. I was like, I want to do this right. I want to do this differently. I don't want to have this cycle continue. And the second I felt that slipping away from me because I wasn't able to breastfeed her, I felt like I wasn't producing what I was supposed to do as a mother. And I crumbled. So I became somehow, I don't even know how this happened, but in my postpartum world, I became obsessed with breast milk. Like I was pumping because she wasn't able to extract the milk. I was pumping, and I would chart the time I started pumping to the time I ended pumping to the amount, to the cc or to the ml, how much I pumped. And if then I went to go pump for the same period of time, if I pumped less, I would have a complete meltdown over it, convince myself my milk supply was going away. And for those of you that aren't moms, this isn't probably going to be a whole lot relevant, but if you are a mom and you've ever breastfed, you will totally relate to this. I became obsessive about the fact that I couldn't breastfeed my daughter, to the point that like I couldn't give her a bottle because I was so upset that I thought the bond with her and I was ruined because I couldn't nurse her. I was like, this is it. Like, I'm never going to break the cycle. You know, her and I are going to have problems. We're never going to be close because we're not able to bond. And my daughter was about 6 months old where I was so obsessive about this and so anxious about this. And I was like wound tighter than you could imagine, that I started experiencing panic attacks for the first time in my life, where I would get, my neck would tighten, my chest would get heavy, and I would go numb from head to toe. So I went to the doctors. I actually drove myself to the hospital one night. And my husband was like, you know, you're anxious. That's all this is. You're anxious. I went by myself because I was convinced I was dying, truth be told. And I went home. They said, nothing's wrong with you. They ran all these tests. Like 5-6 days go by and it happens again. My neck is tight. I can't breathe. I'm hyperventilating and I'm numb everywhere, head to toe. My hands felt like Novocaine all over my face, my lips, my eyes, even behind my eyes. I could feel pins and needles. And I went back to the hospital, and I was laying in the hospital bed by myself, feeling like I had nothing. I had nobody. And the doctor came in. It was the same doctor who had seen me 5 or 6 days prior. And he said, are you okay? And I said, I don't think so. I really don't think I am. I have no worth. Like, I'm just a mom. I can't even breastfeed my child. I'm not producing. Like, she's never going to love me. We don't have this bond. And for whatever reason, guys, I just completely crumbled. Like, in that hospital bed, laying there by myself, I lost it. And he said, he was like, you realize, right, that you right now, the way that you're living is not healthy for you or for your daughter. Long story short, they ended up telling me that they thought I could possibly have MS because of the numbness. So for 3 or 4 days, it was Easter weekend. I'll never forget. It was the worst experience of my life. I was so anxious that I had MS. And again, this all comes back to like the symptoms I was feeling. It was the anxiety of, if something's wrong with me, I can't take care of my kids. I'm not producing. I have no worth. I won't be loved. And so the second they said that I could possibly have MS, I crumbled. And all I felt for those 3 days was complete numbness. I couldn't walk. My feet were numb. Like, I was convinced I had MS, and the more I thought about the numbness and tingling, the more prevalent it was, to the point that I almost didn't even go to my parents' house for Easter because I couldn't feel anything in my body. And the Monday after Easter, I got a phone call. I went for the MRI that morning. My PCP was kind enough to run the report stat, called me Monday afternoon and said, you don't have MS. Within minutes, the numbness was completely gone. And that was the day that I realized that our mind is so powerful. It's the most powerful thing that we have. And that it is true. You can have a physical response to an emotional problem. If you let stuff build, guys, and you don't ever address it, whatever that emotional problem is will manifest in some sort of physical way. So you have to, like, I know people have opinions about therapy, and I know Rachel talks about it, but I am a huge believer that therapy, everybody needs it. We all have our shit. Excuse my language if you have kids in the room. Every single person on this call right now and every person that watches this playback has their shit. It's just a fact. And I look at it as there's an expert in everything. I consider myself an expert in health and fitness. You know, my husband is an IT salesperson. He considers himself an expert in IT. Therapists are experts in therapy. So there is nothing wrong with going to somebody. I promise you that if you go, you will learn. So if you find the right therapist, you will find so much out about yourself, and they will help you connect the dots to why you are the way that you are. Best thing that I ever did. So I'm sorry that was a rant, but she talks about, making herself severely ill from trying to keep something inevitable from happening. I think we all get caught up in that point where we're just like living so anxious and we're living in fear that we're not living our lives. And I finally learned from that whole experience that I just need to live my life. Being worried about the bad stuff never makes the bad stuff go away. It's just going to make you not live your life. Okay, so she talks about how the second she would achieve a goal, she immediately thought, okay, what next? That I feel like relates back to happiness leads to success. Success does not lead to happiness. That's the whole changing the goalpost thing that we already talked about. I feel like it's very easy to get caught up in that. Okay. 2, have you ever had an experience? I just shared that. 3, where do you tend to fail when it comes to taking care of yourself? I think I've gotten really good at making sure I eat well, I exercise, I make time for myself in that regard. I just think that I still have to improve on making my wants and my needs and my desires or my family's a priority over other people's, because I'm a healer, I'm a fixer by nature, and I always put myself last. So that's something that I focus on every single day. My biggest takeaway, you can't pour from an empty cup, like I said. Therapy. She says, if it weren't for my therapist, I never would have understood the connection between my childhood insecurities and my adult accomplishments. Again, you had the best, most beautiful, sunshine and rainbows kind of a childhood. I guarantee you there's still something that happened or something that made you the way that you are today. That could be something that you're struggling with. And then last thing, she talks about reordering your list. Every time that I first work with somebody, I ask them to tell me their priorities and number them and list them. 9 times out of 10, the people that I ask, if I say like, Beck, what are your priorities right now? Like, tell me your priorities, list them. 9 times out of 10, if it's a mom, the kids will go first, the husband will go second. Job might be third, maybe the dog is fourth. By the time they get to the bottom of the list, 9 times out of 10, people don't put themselves on that list. You should be at the top of your priority list. I'm a firm believer in this, and I don't even care if you're a mom, you should be before your kids, because it all comes back to the fact that you cannot pour from an empty cup. If you're at the bottom of your list and you make yourself the bottom priority and you never take care of yourself, you're never going to be able to give to the people at the top of your list. All right, chapter 4, I'm almost there. I'm better than you, the lie. This one's just, I'm going to be quick on this. Bringing others down, this is my keeper. It won't elevate you. All words have power, even the ones whispered behind someone's back. I love when Jan posted the quote about fix somebody else's crown, but don't tell them that it was crooked. So I love that. It drives me nuts when you hear people or you see people that go to Dunkin' and they pay for somebody, the person behind them's order, and then they go and they blow up social media about how they did it. Do it for somebody, do a good deed, but don't feel like you have to broadcast it to the whole world. Okay. Number 1, describe a time in your life you felt judged by other women. Describe a time when you felt yourself judging somebody else. I feel judged daily being a health and fitness coach. There's a lot of skepticism around it. There's a lot of people that think it's a scam. There's a lot of people that mock it. There's been times where I posted before and afters that people will tell me that it's not me, that it's not the same person, that I'm pushing my belly out, that I'm sucking my belly in, whatever it might be. There's so much judgment around health and fitness and what I do on a daily basis. It makes me insane, and that's a whole nother topic I could talk about for hours and days. But judging others, I judged like crazy when I was going through infertility. Both of my kids are through in vitro fertilization, and I spent a good probably 5 years of my life judging every single person that could get pregnant. How can they get pregnant and I can't? How do they have 3 kids and I can't even have one? Literally everything under the sun. And I think the biggest thing is that, or also too, when I was trying to breastfeed my daughter, everybody that could breastfeed, I was like mad about it. I was jealous. And it all comes down to the most oftentimes that when we judge, more oftentimes than not, it's a result of one of our own insecurities. It's something that somebody else has that we wish that we had. it doesn't make our insecurities go away. And it oftentimes really doesn't even make us feel better about ourselves or our situation. So, especially when it comes to moms, don't judge. You know, everybody has their own way of momming. How I mom is totally different than how Beck might mom, and how my sister-in-law moms. And it doesn't mean that one way is right and one way is wrong. Every single person has a different way of getting through life. We all struggle and we all do our best. And just tell yourselves, like, when you find yourself judging somebody, just say, you know what? She's doing her best. He's doing his best, whatever it might be. Negative results of a tendency to judge others. This is the biggest thing. It's going to keep you from building a tribe, or from having a tribe in the first place. If you are somebody that looks around you and you don't have a big group of friends, it's probably a result of judging. At some point or another, they probably had something that you wanted. You judged them for it, and here you are sitting on an island all alone. So, and you know, it really keeps us from connecting on a deeper, richer level, because we're too stuck on surface level with assumptions that we're making. What, according to Rachel, is the difference between judging people and holding them accountable? Holding each other accountable comes from a place of love. Judgment comes from a place of fear, disdain, or even hate. And I loved when she said, don't dress up your judgments to accountability to make your conscience feel better. I think we've all been guilty of that before. Holding each other accountable takes place inside a community and relationships, which is where you are. And then my takeaway, our judgments keep us from building a stronger tribe or having a tribe in the first place. Like I said, judging has to stop. So does our compulsion to compete with everybody around us. Guys, this is so prevalent, like right now in the world that we live in, because again, it all comes back to the social media world. It's so easy to look at that highlight reel. It's so easy to compare yourself to every single person out there that you see. That's why I think I try so hard on my social media to be transparent and vulnerable, because it's such a disservice to just get on your Facebook or your Instagram every single day and act like your life is sunshine and rainbows. I just posted something about 2 weeks ago about marriage and how marriage is hard and the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And it's just like any other relationship. The grass is greener where you water it. And I had like 7 or 8 people message me and say, thank you so much for posting that, because I've been struggling and I felt like I'm the only person, me and my husband are the only people having a tough time. Chances are 9 times out of 10, whatever it is you're struggling with, everybody else is struggling with it too. They're just too damn scared to post it to the world because they're afraid of what people are going to think of them. All right, last one. Chapter 5, loving him is enough for me. A keeper, if you're not able to value yourself, no one else will either. That's for every relationship in your life, not just necessarily with a spouse or boyfriend or husband or wife. It's true for every single relationship that you have. Number 1 says, I'm not the only woman who's ever let a man treat her badly. Do any stories, your own or someone else's, come to mind when you read that? If you feel comfortable, share it. I have one girl that I'm currently working with right now who is 320 pounds. I graduated with her and she was one of the great stars of the basketball team in high school. And she found herself in a relationship that's very unhealthy, very toxic. And she's been trying to lose weight for probably 6 years. Again, 320 pounds, extremely unhealthy, has a lot of health conditions right now because of it, and came to me. And I kept saying to her, I keep telling you, I can't help you if I don't know what's going on, because she would do really well and she would lose all this weight and then it would come back on. And she'd totally fall off. I wouldn't hear from her, wouldn't see her. And then we'd do it again and we'd do it again. And I kept saying, I feel like something's going on. I work with a lot of people. I have this feeling that there's something you're not telling me. And she finally said to me, when I lose weight, my husband gets so abusive because he's afraid that I'm going to leave him for somebody else, or I'll find somebody else if I go back to being what I used to be. That is a very unhealthy, toxic relationship. And that's one where, Rachel talks about how her and her husband came out of this okay and they survived it and all is well. But that is one that you get out of. That is one that is never going to be okay unless the person can drastically change. And again, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to happen. And then, what does she believe is more likely to happen? She talks about how her and her husband's relationship isn't usually what you would see happen in that circumstance. It's far more likely to happen as long as you allow someone to treat you badly. And then they will continue to do so. So that's the far more likely outcome. I think she's like the outlier in this situation where somebody's treating you terribly and you let them back into your life and it works out beautifully. I think that's very rare. Because like she says, it's far more likely that as long as you allow somebody to continue to treat you that way, it's going to continue happening. Biggest point, if you're not able to value yourself, no one else will either. So at the end of the day, you have to be that person that sees yourself as valuable, and you have to know your worth, because if you don't, nobody else is going to. And she says, it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been willing to walk away. Takeaway, sometimes choosing to walk away, even if it means breaking your own heart, can be the greatest act of self-love you have access to. So that brings us to chapter 6, which we'll talk about next week. I'm going to open up the floor to you guys if there's anything that you want to talk about. I think I'm most excited next week about getting to chapter 8 and 9, which is a lot about momming. But one other thing I want to say about, chapter 2, and I wrote this down here, is I'll start tomorrow. Research, there was a study that I read once that says that 5% of people who commit to something will actually do it. Will actually, like, let's say it were signing up for a gym membership. 5% of people will actually do that, will actually, buy the gym membership. And then an even smaller percentage of that will actually use it. So don't be that person. Keep that commitment to yourself. Show up for yourself every single day. And remember to be that friend that you can count on to yourself. So I'm going to open it up. You guys can, I think most of you are unmuted. I'm going to unmute anybody who isn't. Let me see here. There we go. Marie, for some reason I can't unmute you. I don't know why. Okay, so anybody that wants to share anything from chapters 1 through 5, just share anything else on your mind, anything at all. I don't know why. Becca, is it you that's muted? No, maybe you are. No, Becca, are you muted?
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you. Very quietly though. I feel like this. Okay, talk again.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, I can hear you now.
I'm at work, so don't tell.
Okay, we won't tell anybody.
I think the only thing I want to share is that I've really, this has been a good, kick in the ass for me to get, accountable again.
Yep.
And be a part of, the accountability portion, which is huge for me.
Yep.
It just makes it, I'm not a big, I don't know, I was kind of leery of the book because self-help is kind of, an interesting topic. But I like the approach is, figure out why you lied to yourself.
Yes.
And fix it. Not not a coddling, if you will, self-help. It's more of figure it out and fix it. And that approach a lot.
Yep. I love that she also is vulnerable and shares past experiences from her life and applies it to the lie, and then how she fixed that lie or how she changed it. Because I think that that's so important. There's times where if I were to just read the lie, I'm not good enough, I could think of in my mind what that chapter could be about or what that could mean or how she could talk about that, but relating it to a personal experience, I just think takes it to a whole nother level. And I also wanted to mention, I don't know if you guys are listening to her podcast, but she has 2 podcasts. One is called Rise with Rachel Hollis, which is her podcast. And then I think it's called Rise Together is the podcast with her and her husband. And it's all about marriage and relationships. And they're both amazing, amazing podcasts. And you really get to know her even better listening to her podcast. So I've gained a lot from this book, but her podcasts are amazing also. So, yeah. Erin, anything?
I didn't catch your name, the woman who just spoke.
Oh, Becky.
Becky, hi.
Rebecca, whatever you want to call her.
Yeah, that accountability piece, I think it's also like a social piece, is important not only for just fun and, keeping yourself to the projects or exercises, whatever you want to do, keeping you to that. But something I've thought a lot about as I've been listening is there's the stress piece, and then there's like the rest and recovery piece. And I think a lot of times people end up, including myself, I'm one of those workaholics, end up failing or not following through on something because basically they don't build in the stress recovery side of things. Yeah. So, like, for example, sleep is a big thing for folks, or just even cutting out screen time so that I can sleep better before, because like the blue light from the screen, I just read, is really bad for you and your sleep. Or like if I'm working on a project, taking 5 minutes for a break to meditate and just kind of turn off, or even just 2 minutes to take a walk to get up from my desk. I think a lot of people don't bring that piece in, or like we push ourselves and we work out and everything, but then like we don't do something social or fun afterwards to kind of like give ourselves a reward. So that's just something I've been thinking a lot about lately.
No, that's great. It's very true. You have to have time to refill your cup,
Right. And exactly what she was saying with that.
And I think that the cool thing, and what I've learned again from therapy, is everybody's cup refills differently. And a lot of that has to do with like your love language and how you feel loved, or what makes you feel loved, or what makes you feel special. But, like everybody has a different idea of how they want to refill their cup, or how they like to, or what makes them feel fulfilled. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that, like, what you feel refills your cup may be very different from what I feel refills my cup. And you really have to take the time, because there's no there's no outline, or there's no guide that says like for every single person, this is going to help you alleviate stress. This is going to make you feel loved. This is going to make you feel better. Like we're all, there is only one Aaron. There is only one Beck. There's only one me. There's only one Mike. There's like, we are who we are. We're very different creatures. Every single one of us is so, so different from the other. And so figuring out like what fills your cup, what makes you feel fulfilled in life, and what calms you down has to be specific to you. Or else, if I say to you, you should go shopping at the mall, and de-stress and take time for you. Maybe shopping happens to be super stressful to you. Like some women, that's their, they'll go on a shopping spree, and that makes them de-stress, and they go on like this, big splurge, and they feel fantastic afterwards. But like for me, I find shopping kind of overwhelming, and I don't love to go shopping. It's just it's an activity I don't really enjoy. So it's important to figure out what it is that centers you. And like you said, meditating really has helped you. I know that there's other people out there that the calmness and the quiet of meditating actually causes them more anxiety or stress, because their mind just like goes. So for some people, busying themselves might be a stress relief, versus for you, like you find peace and comfort in that. So it's really important to figure out, try a bunch of different things, and take time for you, and do different activities, and say like, well, when I went for that massage, that really helped me recenter myself and de-stress. When I did this, that didn't. And you kind of learn as you go.
Yep.
I wonder if I was trying to think if there was anything else that I missed. I had like, I have like these Post-its just like everywhere throughout the book. And I was like, I'll read through like page by page, and I'll do the guide, but I just totally flew off the guide. So I want to see if there was just anything else that I had. I think in general, a lot of these chapters kind of tie together. and a lot of them go hand in hand. And once you figure out, it's like piecing together a puzzle. You know, once you figure out what makes you feel good enough, makes that piece of it, makes you less judgmental. When you feel more fulfilled in your own life, you know what I mean? You're not, there's not that I'm better than you perception on life anymore. And then, you know, it all just ties together. You know, if you feel like you're good enough, you don't judge. If you feel like you're good enough, you're not relying on somebody else's love to make you feel worthy. So I'm excited about chapter 7 is going to be interesting. And we'll start off with chapter 6 next week. 6 through 10 is what we'll talk about.
Sounds good.
Sounds good to you guys. I appreciate you guys hopping on so much. I was hoping more people would jump on, but I think some people were having internet issues, it sounds like, in the group. So I'm going to try to keep it close to about an hour each week and talk as fast as I can, and then allow some time for you guys to share. So, you know, as you go through your discussion guide, when you're answering the questions, if there's ever one that you guys feel like you want to cover, like if there's a chapter that like really resonates with you and you're like, I really want to share how I perceive this chapter or my notes on this chapter, like post in the group and say, hey, I would love to, when it comes to discussion call time, you know, I would love to share chapter 6, or I'd love to share chapter 8 or whatever. Because I want it to be, you know, as fulfilling for you guys as it can be, and also as interactive as possible. So nobody wants to just sit and listen to me talk for an hour. So I think you guys
we did sit here and listen. So it's okay.
I know, it's mostly me, blah, blah, blah. I don't know why this is
fine. It was good.
I'm glad that you are one of Teresa's friends, right, Erin?
Well, yes, I'm actually a friend of a friend, really. Okay. So Marianne is another.
Wait, Marianne Cervantes?
Yeah. Do you know her?
We all know her. So so Beck used to be married to one of her husband's best friends, right?
Oh my goodness. That's great. And how do you know her, Kim?
So I went to college with Al, her husband, and also therefore her, but I graduated with
Al. Okay. So Marianne and I went to middle school and high school together.
Oh, no way. Okay. I was wondering if you were like pharmacist related or if it was totally separate from that.
No, but I'm actually a nurse. So.
Oh, cool. All right. So we got a lot of healthcare people, lots of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Good for you. Do you live in that area of New York or?
No, I actually live in Missouri.
Oh, okay.
So my spouse is in the military, so we move around.
That's right. You did say that. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have like so much appreciation for that because my sister, my brother-in-law is an infectious disease doctor, and he has been in the military since like he was going through grad school. And she never really went with him because she always just kind of stayed put. She was a physical therapist and she did her own thing. But it was tough. Like he's now out of it, thankfully. But there was a lot of crying phone calls and lonely times. And she has 2 kids now, and she was pregnant with my younger nephew when he got out. And it was really it was just becoming way too much, that it was just too difficult for them. So he's in Syracuse, New York now, and he works at SUNY Syracuse, or whatever you would call it, I guess.
Yeah, the forestry school.
Yeah, but I have so much respect for people because, like I said, I mean, I have a couple of friends who their husbands are still military. We have a ton of Beachbody coaches that are military, because Beachbody pays for coaching fees if you're military. So
that's neat.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's one of the things that I love the most about the company is they're super supportive of military spouses or military people in general. So like to be a coach every month, we have to pay like $16.95, or it's a business service fee. And if you're active military or retired duty, they waive that fee, and you're allowed to basically get discounts on everything at no cost to you. So we have a ton of coaches that are military. So, you know, we have like Emily Faber, and she's just constantly moving. I swear to you, it's like every 6 weeks. Yeah, she's like pregnant now, and her husband's currently stationed in Hawaii, and they just moved to, I think it's Texas. But it's just like she's all over the map. She's like, oh, I guess we're like now she jokes about it. She basically showed a picture of, it was like her suitcase, her yoga mat and heels, and that was it. She's like, it's come down to that. This is all I bother bringing. I don't even bother bringing clothes at this point. It's just stressful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A move is definitely like the most stressful transition time in like military families' lives.
Yeah.
It's like you don't even realize it until you're like in the thick of it.
Do you have kids?
So, I don't.
You don't.
I have 2 cats.
Okay.
That's it. So.
Which is enough. You're a cat mom. That's good. You're a fur mom.
Yeah. They are more like roommates, you know, that can be a little annoying at times when they wake me up in the middle of the night. But
That's
but
funny.
no, they're good. They're cute. They, you know, try to earn their cuteness. So
Well, I have 2. I have a son and a daughter. Becky's got a tribe. She's got 4.
oh
So-
yeah, wow,
Yeah.
that is a tribe.
3 boys and 1 little girl. So
Aw, that's so sweet. And you both are in upstate New York, or where are you at?
I'm upstate New York.
she's
Yeah.
upstate New York, Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. Okay.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. So I live out in Westfield, Mass, but I went to school in Albany, obviously at Albany College.
Right. Yeah,
So
I've been visiting up there.
really?
I didn't barely see Marianne the entire weekend. I was going up to visit her, but man, pharmacists know how to party. Like, like
She was probably at a KE
I barely
party.
saw her.
Yep. Well, no, she was Bro Pi Phi, wasn't she?
I think so. Yeah. Is that like the social service?
Sorority, yeah. I think she was.
Something like that.
She's gonna watch this back and be like, "Thanks, guys, for talking about me." But yeah, so Al was KE, and KE knew how to throw a good party. So we spent a lot of times at this ridiculous bar called Ralph's, which was like,
I think I've been to Ralph's.
Yeah, you walked in, all you smelled was vomit, and it was like, oh, it was the worst.
I used to get in with my Price Chopper card.
Yeah, she got in with her price shopper.
That's
You have to
funny.
go chef something at the door, so I always use my Price Chopper card, and I'd show him that, and he'd nod, and Riley would look at it, and that was it. My
It's
favorite.
unreal. It's unbelievable. I have so many great memories from college, but another story.
I had to go back to work. They found me.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Trouble.
It was nice to meet you.
All right. So bye back. Have a good night at work.
Bye.
So we will, I feel like, am I frozen? I feel like my mouth's moving, but I'm not talking or something. It's like,
No, you look a little blurry, but I can see you moving.
I wonder what's up with that. Okay. Well, so we will reconvene on next Sunday then.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Great.
Have a great night.
You too. Thanks for hopping on.